This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
I want to welcome you to this episode of Real Talk. In just a second, Dr. Rupinder Toor joins us. She's behind a petition. It's a bigger picture project, Project EmpowHer, with the H-E-R end, EmpowHer. We're going to be talking about contraception, birth control in Canada. Should it be free? No, you may have an opinion one way or another, or you may not. I mean, how much do you actually know about the history of birth control in Canada? To generalize in big, wide swipes, I would suggest that the female members of our audience probably know more about it than the dudes. Just a fact. We're kind of known, generally speaking, for being a little bit clueless on some stuff. Not all of us. Some of you will write in, I'm sure, and say, I've taken leadership in this. I've been an advocate for this. I understand the issues. I didn't know up until a short time ago, up until we started doing some background research for this conversation, that birth control wasn't even legal in Canada through the 1960s. Dr. Toor is a medical director out of Calgary, the Northeast Women's Clinic and the IUD, and she's got a long history in this, a very informed background to her advocacy, and I'm looking forward to that conversation. Plus some updates on news stories you've no doubt seen, including a man arrested and charged after a hate-motivated attack, a horrific confrontation targeting a Muslim family in our home city of Edmonton. We're going to get to those details, and we're going to review what some of you have told us about Canada's cost of living crisis. It popped up yesterday in our interview with Tristan Hopper, talking about why he thinks that the Conservatives are surging federally, numbers-wise, polling-wise, but there's more to it than that. It's not just the politics, and that's a story that we're going to continue to dig into in the weeks and months to come. This episode of Real Talk is presented by Business Career College. Did you know that certified financial planners are starting at six-figure salaries in Canada, and the demand for them is growing fast? You can become a CFP with Business Career College. You could launch your own business, earn great money, and help people achieve their financial goals. Business Career College is the absolute best place to get your CFP. To become a certified financial planner with online courses, expert instructors to help you through, and decades of experience helping students succeed. You can learn more. Get the ball rolling today at businesscareercollege.com. Well, there's a petition right now available to be signed, and we're going to link to that in our show notes if this is a conversation that resonates with you. It's initiated by our leadoff guest this morning, Dr. Rupinder Toor out of Calgary. It's asking the federal government to make birth control free in Canada. Dr. Toor is a medical director with the IUD and Northeast Women's Clinic in Calgary and the chief medical officer with Project EmpowHer. And it's a real pleasure to have you join us here this morning on the show. Thanks for making time for us.
Hi, Ryan. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm really excited to bring men into this conversation. I feel like, they have been not included historically. And I think they're an important partner in this initiative.
I'm so happy that you lead off with that, because I've got some questions for you. And amongst those questions is, do you consider this a women's health issue? And I've been privy to some really interesting conversations. And obviously it's not just a women's health issue, but why don't we talk about how this has been viewed or how this has been treated in Canada through the decades?
Yeah, I mean, historically, because, obviously women are the ones that actually bear the reproduction. It seems like, a lot of that responsibility has fallen on their shoulders. But I think, we've evolved as a society to really realize that, there are actually, two partners involved, and we need everyone involved. I think reproduction is something that doesn't just affect women. It affects individuals, it affects families, it affects society. So I think it's not a women's issue. It's not necessarily a men's issue alone. It's not a youth issue alone. It's a human issue because it affects all of us.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure that there are a ton of compelling arguments, which I bet that you're you're going to make right here on this episode for this to be something that is treated as a societal issue, much like other healthcare is across the country. Why don't we talk just sort of a scene setter, if you could, about the situation right now in Canada with access to birth control? Maybe kind of a quick history lesson, if you don't mind. My understanding is it was decriminalized just before 1970. That's not forever ago. And even today, present day, a lot of people, for various reasons, just don't have access to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the history of birth control is so interesting. It's one of the few things that I think it's really under-recognized and under-celebrated as far as how much it's helped our society sort of move forward. So as you mentioned, birth control in Canada was illegal up until 1969. So it was just decriminalized just over 50 years ago. So we actually haven't been doing this for a long time. So we're trying to get it right. I think, we're obviously making moves forward. But, just for your listeners, I think they might be surprised to know, number one, that birth control is not actually free, So, access to a doctor is covered under universal health care. So my patients can access me without any kind of cost barriers. But once I write that prescription, they now have to bear the cost of how much it's going to cost to fill that prescription. I really do see birth control as a public health issue. At least 90% of sexually active couples are not planning pregnancy. So, that's a pretty significant number of people in our society. And if we don't get contraception, the consequences are pretty significant. We know that without birth control, a woman can be expected to have 10 to 15 pregnancies in her lifetime. That is from developing countries where they don't have any access. And so that's what we're up against, right? So we need to do something. 40% of pregnancies in Canada are unintended, right? 1 in 5 pregnancies in Canada ends in an abortion. So I think there's lots of room for improvement. I think, if we really want to sort of make sure we help the health of our society, prevention is always going to be better. Unintended pregnancies cost Canadian taxpayers $320 million a year. And that's just direct healthcare costs. That's not including any kind of social subsidies for people who are having pregnancies when they're not intending them, but now they need support of, the society to help sort of to raise that child. And keep in mind, when I'm telling you all these statistics, these are stories with the tears removed, right? I see these stories every single day in my clinic. And this is what's really driven me to sort of go and advocate for my patients. There's so many times where I have conversations with them and they're, these young women and girls, they're trying to do their best to, live that life of self-determination. And control of reproduction is really the first step, because oftentimes with a vulnerable, life is something that happens to me. I don't get to choose what happens. And oftentimes pregnancy is something that just happens to me. I don't get to choose it. And we want to change that narrative. And it's through contraception that can happen. But there can't be any barriers, because the people who really, don't want to be pregnant or can't afford the medicines are the ones that really don't want to be pregnant and it would really affect their lifestyles. And so you see this cycle of poverty that sometimes keeps continuing. And that's what's really driven my work, is some of the patients that I've seen and some of their stories. And, we just need to, I think we can do better as a country, and we can do better for our women, girls, and for our families and our societies.
Yeah, sometimes these sort of like, I don't know if I would go so far as to call it an epiphany, but it's not lost on me that we're talking to you about this in the midst of other ongoing conversations on the show about things like the cost of living crisis, about people, families, and individuals making very difficult decisions about where their money's going, about unemployment up, about utility costs through the roof. I mean, this all factors into it. Just curious, off the top of my head, have you been able to, you and your team, ballpark a figure of what it might look like in the federal budget? I mean, I guess technically, though, this would also come down to the provinces, wouldn't it? Right? Like this
Right.
is a healthcare initiative. So some provinces may be more down with this than others. But if we say that unintended or unintentional pregnancies, cost the Canadian public $320 million a year, what would it cost, so to speak, to eliminate cost barriers for birth control?
Yeah, I mean, what I like to call this policy, it's really an irresistible policy, because the benefits are just, across the board. So first of all, when we talk about free birth control, your listeners might be thinking, well, how much is that going to cost us now, right? And that's a really valid question, right? We have decisions we need to make as taxpayers as to where we want to put our money. But, the great thing about this policy is that it has been shown, studies have shown this time and time again, BC passed this based on the same data, is that every dollar that we invest in universal contraception can save the system up to $9 in the public sector. And so that's looking at direct healthcare costs of an unintended pregnancy. That's just looking at, the doctor's visit, the delivery, the postpartum visit. But that also can include things like childcare or cost to the justice system as well. So, it really does save money. So economically, it is a sound policy, right? So if we're just going to look at it from that perspective, it really does make sense. So really from that sense. But I think, what we're really talking about too is the social benefits, right? We can see that how access to birth control that was equitable and secure, can really help to strengthen individuals and families and societies, right? So there's a huge social benefit. When I see, a young woman who's facing an unplanned pregnancy and her life is now going to be significantly changed, how do we measure the cost of her untapped potential? Like her life now has significantly, maybe now her access to education, her access to economic security is going to be, compromised. Maybe, living the life that she wants, her happiness factor is going to be compromised, right? So I think, there's that social sort of benefit. And the reason that we're pushing for, you mentioned, healthcare is typically under the provincial jurisdiction. Why are we pushing this at a federal level? And it's simply that reproductive rights are human rights, and they cannot be left to the whim of changing provincial government. So every 4 years, depending on what ideology of the government that gets in, that human right is going to be up for negotiation. And that doesn't seem right or fair. And so I think as women and as men who love women, and as, people who see where the strength in our society is going to come when all members of our society are doing well, that we really need to have this at a federal level because it needs to be protected at a federal level. The other, thing that we're finding now within Canada is there's inequities that are starting to rise up. There is going to be a report that's going to be published later in September, but looking at inequities across Canada for access to reproductive care. And so BC obviously passed this policy in April. And so in that province, any person with a healthcare card and a prescription can go to the pharmacy and get the prescription birth control covered with no cost. And since April, we have seen that the demand has skyrocketed in that province. So, we have a great little pilot project that shows us, yes, that this is a successful program, that, cost really is an issue. And so, we really want to push it at the federal level. And the other reason, we talk about, reproductive rights being human rights, and sometimes we get complacent, we get comfortable where we are, but all we need to do is just look south of the border, and we see that today in real time, these rights are being, access to, reproductive care is being restricted in the US. They are making policies to make that more and more difficult. And they're not the only country, right? There's just something that's sort of happening across the world. So I think, we need to sort of define ourselves as Canadians, and who are we? And, and sort of put that into our policies. And the other way, I think that, for federally, then again, like how will we implement this? I think that might be the other sort of next big question, is that your listeners, again, may be surprised to hear that Canada is one of the only countries in the world that has universal healthcare, but does not have a pharmacare program. And so that gap that I talked about where, people can access the doctor, that is equitable. But the minute they leave my clinic and they have a prescription in their hand, their access to that medicine is now not equitable. And so pharmacare is going to try and address that. And of course, that is a long-term project. And we understand it's going to take some time to, unroll. But this government has promised pharmacare to Canadians. And so we feel coverage of contraception would be a very important and symbolic first step of that pharmacare program. And that could be implemented quickly, right? So, within a year or two, we could have this.
Well, and you could have a federal government too, I know you're obviously a medical expert and a celebrated and award-winning one at that. I kind of cut your bio a little bit short and introduced you. You got this long list of all these honors, and maybe I'll do that when we thank you for your time so people know who they've been hearing from. But my point being is I'd love to get into the politics of it a little bit with you as well. This is more like your personal opinion. So enter that conversation as you see fit or to the degree that you're comfortable. But I could see a federal government right now that's lagging in the polls, that's looking for support, that quite frankly is screwed if they lose the prop-up support of the NDP. And this sounds to me like a pretty good and doable first step that even if you're just being selfish and just being a political strategist, it seems like something that's doable. Dr. Toor, I appreciate that you're not just making this about the money, because the money's relevant and budgets are relevant, but that's not it. Just even look at the name of the project, and we've punched the link into our live chat. It'll be in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube at Project EmpowHer.ca/Our Vision. You can check it out. You write about empowering girls and individuals with the reproductive life plan. The site talks about how empowered girls and individuals are more likely to get educated, experience economic stability, take better care of those around them in the future. They become strong social citizens who in turn empower the next generation. When girls, women, and individuals do well, we all do well. Where do you gauge public opinion on this? Like, do you think the average person goes, yeah, I'm okay with it, I don't know much about it? I mean, do you have people that are like, vociferously opposing it?
Yeah, I mean, those are all really great questions. I don't even know where to start. So the first thing I'm going to say, I've seen that, where societies do well is where women do well. And I say that in the traditional way, in the sense that women, biologically and socially have been wired to take care of others. So if you take care of the people in that community that take care of others, you are going to see the benefits, right? And so, that I think is something that just a very high level we can sort of think about, right? So, so I feel like women are one of the most untapped and uncelebrated and unrecognized, natural resources available to society, right? You have a society of women that feel good, that feel empowered. They are going to give so much, not only to their families, their neighbors, their communities, their workplaces. So, I mean, that's a very high level talk. But as a sort of, to answer your question about, political strategy, and if there's any political strategist listening to this, I'm going to tell you, this is an extremely popular policy. There was a study that came out that showed that 83% of Canadians approve of free prescription birth control across the country, and 7 in 10 feel it's an urgent issue. The support even amongst, so that support was seen regardless of sort of age, gender, education, community size, if they lived rural or urban, or even their parental status, and even amongst political sort of voters of all three federal parties, right? The support was even the lowest was 75%. And so I would urge all political federal parties to include this in their platform, because there's huge support for this, right? How can we get 83% of Canadians to agree on anything, I think, is phenomenal, right? So, and the fact that it's an urgent issue, people are seeing what's happening around the world. So I would encourage all of the federal parties to include this in their platform, because if they don't, they're going to be missing out on one policy that seems like it's unifying the whole country. Because, we can all have our ideas about, how we want to move forward, with respect, let's say, to energy or housing or immigration, like all of those things. But this is something that we can all get behind. And again, it doesn't matter, the age of the voter, the gender of the voter, the political, affiliation of that voter. This is a very, very, popular policy across the board.
What is it, do you think, that stood in the way? Like why was it criminalized until 1969? Is it the power of religion? I mean, is it that simple?
Yeah, I mean, we have to think about, sometimes when we think about where we are today and we look back historically, we have to put all that stuff into context,
Sure.
Right? There was a context that was happening. And when we look at, even the civil rights movement, human rights, we have been doing phenomenal work, just in the last 100 years. And so I know we're not there at perfection, but it's going to take efforts like this to really get people involved. And I do want to talk a little bit about the petition, because really this is the main avenue or the main venue where the public gets to vote or gets to put their word in, right? So because this policy has been talked about, it's been talked about at provincial levels, federal levels. Like I've heard this in conversations, different political parties in different provinces, tabling this. The Alberta NDP did talk about it here too. So, this has been going on. Conversation has been happening. But what we really need to think about is, where are we as a society, right? And where do we want to be? And I think we're due for a policy like this, right? When we look at a policy that's helped, women sort of, just equal the playing field for them, just not to put these barriers of cost for them to live this life of self-determination that people who can't get pregnant don't have to bear or often aren't involved with, right? That's something to really think about. And so I lose my train of thought sometimes.
You and me both, Doc. You and me both. Thankfully, I have a million things to say, so I'll jump in here. I'm just taking a look at our live chat, and obviously people are very engaged in this subject, and people from all types of backgrounds and all situations. Anna says, my grandmother was not allowed to use birth control for religious reasons. After 12 children, including 3 sets of twins, she secretly started taking birth control provided by a neighbor. If not for her resilience, she was a teacher in a one-room country school who used the classroom to raise her kids while earning a living. Sounds like a remarkable person. Anna says she would have been nothing more than free labor for their farm. Yeah, pretty interesting. I mean, there's so many stories like that, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're evolving as a society when it comes to these things, and so again, like when I started to really research this, like I started to work in a higher needs area, more sort of, vulnerable populations. And I started to see this pattern that, most of my patients were at risk for an unintended pregnancy. And I started to say, okay, well, what can we do to do better? And when I started to delve into this stuff, I was really surprised to find out things like that. Like even as a doctor, I did not know that birth control was illegal up until 1969. That was something that I found out as I sort of delved into this history. So I think we've made great strides. You look at, the right to vote for women was only in 1919, right? So that wasn't that long ago. Abortion was legalized in 1969. But when we look at sort of a policy that is going to really, help us as, sort of equal the playing field, I think a policy like this will be historic in Canada. I think it will be, as far as one of the most progressive policies for reproductive rights and gender equity in this country. And I think we're due for one, right? I think the time has come. And I always say that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I think, economically it's come, social, benefits has come. So I think, we're getting to that point that this is really important.
Dr. Rupinder Toor is our guest out of Calgary. She's the chief medical officer for Project EmpowHer. Do you think that the developments stateside are potentially, creating more support for this campaign than may have otherwise been the case? Like when you see kind of the makeup of the U.S. Supreme Court right now, you see where some of the southern states are going outlawing abortions. It's obviously become a very significant issue in the U.S. Do you get the sense that has almost a ripple effect up in Canada?
Yeah, for sure. I think, we need to look at that, right? And, pay attention. It's very concerning. When it comes to human rights, it is very concerning because, some of the things that are happening in the US, what I feel, and again, this is my personal opinion, right, is that the women who have the resources and the money are still going to be able to access it. So really what this policy is about, the people in poverty, keeping them in poverty, because the people who don't have the resources are going to be now destined or sentenced to have unintended pregnancy after unintended pregnancy. And with that, you lose agency over your own life, right? So, I think it's really concerning. I think it's something that our, listeners really need to be thinking about. And so, I don't think it's radical what we're talking about. I think we're just saying, that birth control should not be a luxury item. It shouldn't be something you can only get if you can afford, right? Because if you can't afford the birth control, how can you afford to raise a child? Like that's another, and that child, society, we're going to pay the cost, right? So we're going to subsidize or we're going to have to help. And so what it's about talking about is really just strengthening, right, our fiber and who we are. And I think this is just a policy that it makes sense. It makes sense on so many levels. I think the time has come. I think, there's good public support. We only have until August 25th. I want to get back to the petition because I want to make sure your listeners know where to go to get that. So I just want to talk about the fact that, it's a 30-day campaign. It ends on August 25th. Any, woman can sign, obviously any Canadian resident or citizen can sign this petition. So, we, of course, we talk about it being a women's health issue. Most women, we don't have to talk about too much. They said, yes, I agree with this. And if we're not doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for our daughters. We're doing it for our granddaughters. We talk about, historically where we've been, and we talk about our ancestors, but sometimes you think about our descendants and what would they have wanted us to do, given the context of everything that's happening in the world today. So obviously women can sign. And we talked about men, I think, again, have been, have not been brought into this conversation. When I do work at my clinic, we often would do information sessions on, longer acting forms of contraception, and we would do group sessions. And oftentimes our patients would bring in, their male counterparts, either their partners, their husbands, even their fathers. And I used to love having men in the audience because they were so interested in this because they didn't know anything about birth control and how it worked. And they were fascinated. They're like, oh my God, they would ask all the questions. And so I loved it when I had a man in the audience because I knew he was going to ask all the right questions because he was so interested in this and he had never been invited into the conversation. So we would invite all men to go and sign this, to sign this petition, not necessarily because it affects you directly, but it affects people that you love, right? So whether it's your partners, whether it's your daughters, like whether it's, your sisters, whoever it is, right? They're going to benefit from it. And the other thing is that, youth can sign this petition as well, right? So you don't have to be 18. As long as you have an email address and you're Canadian resident, you can sign, because, youth, again, are, when we look at historically the segments of the population that are going to have trouble affording this, but also an unintended pregnancy would have the hugest impact on them. It is the youth. And so really, I think they need to stand up and sign up, because this is something that's going to affect them as well. So you can find the links on projectempower.ca, which is our website. If you search petition contraception Canada, it would probably show up as well. But you only have until August 25th. And we really do want to show a strong show of support. And Alberta has shown up. I am so impressed with this province. People, I think of us as a certain type of thinking. And I think
hillbillies. That's what they think. They think we're right-wing hillbillies.
Yeah. And I think we're so much more than that, not to saying that, to our rural counterparts that, like there's an ideology there, and we respect different, perspectives and all those types of things. But, Alberta is actually a leader when it comes to contraception, right? Like, when I look at utilization rates of certain types of contraceptives that are, more sort of, I guess, they're more effective and they're, a little bit more expensive up front, but it shows that this is a more sophisticated, climate that we're in. IUD usage rates in Alberta are really high compared to the rest of the country. So there is something that's happening here, right? So I think we really are the heart of empowerment, right? We really are the heart of sort of this birth control movement. And I think, we need to redefine ourselves as that.
Yeah, no kidding. There's like an interesting, I wouldn't try to argue this too hard, but there's an interesting pro-life angle to this as well. I think for some people, their religious beliefs, it's like no condoms, full stop, no birth control, full stop. That's fine. They're entitled to their own personal beliefs and how they apply those to their own personal lives. But it strikes me as a pretty obvious and safe conclusion to reach that an initiative like this would decrease, quite likely, the number of abortions in Canada. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about, there's obviously a lot of people who support it, who's not supporting this policy, right? So, and I don't know if they don't support it or, what, maybe it's just a re-education, right? So, we talked about oftentimes, when we have sort of the anti-abortion, the pro-life movement, what they're trying to do is really reduce the number of abortions, and the reproductive rights movement, sometimes they come to clash, but this is one where we can actually get together, because, if you are really genuine, really authentically genuine in your intention to reduce the number of abortions we perform in this country, let's say this is something that, you personally feel would be important to do, then by definition, you must be pro-birth control. You must be pro this policy, because the number one thing that is shown to reduce the number of abortions we'll perform in, is when you make access to birth control universal, so that there is no hoops that any woman or person who can get pregnant needs to jump through to access it. So they don't need to prove their status. They don't need to prove their income level. They don't need to be, paying tuition fees and being a student and then getting the benefits that way. There are no hoops to pass through. Everyone who wants contraception will get it in this country. And so that would be the number one strategy to reduce abortion. So I really feel like, if you're truly against abortion, you need to get behind this policy, because it will reduce the number of abortions in this country. The other sort of, pushback we have sometimes we talk about free birth control is sort of are we promoting, just, free sex and everyone, and I have to reframe that again and say that, birth control is actually not about sex. It's not about sex, right? The decision of who and when to have sex with, or how many people, whatever, those conversations are best had in families, right? So, have those conversations in your families, talk about your values, talk about what's important to you, talk about what concerns you have with your children. That is a conversation to be had in families. Birth control is about having a reproductive life plan, and everybody deserves access to a reproductive life plan without barriers. So again, it shouldn't matter how much money you have in your bank account, that you should be able to access that life plan. So I think we need to reframe that as that, birth control is just, I ask my patients these questions, when do you actually want to be pregnant? How important is it for you not to be pregnant until you're ready? So it becomes goal setting. And I'm telling you, for the girls and the women that live in vulnerable situations, they feel very disempowered. And even to ask that question, oftentimes when I ask, these girls who have these circumstances, they just look confused. And because nobody's ever asked them that question before. And they don't even think it's their choice to make until they're asked. And they're like, well, no, of course. I haven't had one young woman tell me, oh, yes, I want to get pregnant in the next year. They've always said, no, not now, when I'm in my 20s, when I've got a job, when I'm more stable. And I'm like, okay, so if this is what you're telling me, here's a method of contraception that can, I can give you a 99% chance you will reach that goal. You will not get pregnant in the next 5 years. But that method of contraception is expensive because we know the most popular forms of birth control are not the most effective. They are the cheapest. So the top 3 forms of contraception in Canada are condoms, the birth control pill, and withdrawal. And those are not the most effective methods. The really effective methods are the ones that are longer acting. So you pay for that money up front. So let's say for an IUD, you pay the $500. It's super effective, 99% for 5 years, but that's $500 up front. That's a lot of money for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so they end up choosing stuff that just they can afford or whatever they can afford at the time. But again, that's not ideal for what their goals are. And so they're going to live this, life of, I had this goal and I didn't reach my goal and I got pregnant. And, an unintended pregnancy can really kill your vibe, right? If you're going through life and you're enjoying and you're trying to do your best thing. And then you have this, it can be devastating, right? It can be there's emotional costs to that, right? So I just feel like it makes sense, right? It just really makes sense. Again, I think I can talk about this all day long. I have a TEDx talk if you guys want to hear more about some of the patients that I've talked about and how I've been inspired to sort of, make this movement. But, I'm not just doing it. Obviously, this is not about me. This is not about my family. This is about the patients that I see, but it's also about those patients that I don't see all across Canada that are living the very same circumstances as well.
Just to be clear, when you say withdrawal as a method of birth control, not to be crude, you're talking about pulling out, right?
Yeah, my patients like to call it the pull and pray method. And I do say to them, I said, yes, it is user dependent. How good is he at his pulling and how good are you at your praying, right? And we actually joke about it because it is, sure, maybe it'll, it's about a 20, so let's say for 1,000 users who use that method, after a year, we're going to see about 270 of them pregnant. So it's about a 30% failure rate. So what I sort of say is, that might be great for someone who says, what, I want to get pregnant in a year. And if I get pregnant sooner, it's no big deal. I go, you know what? Yeah, use that method because for you, your needs are short term. And if you were to get pregnant, it wouldn't be devastating for you, right? But if you're a young teen and you're 18, 19 and you're registered at university and you're, just starting your courses, withdrawal for you is not going to be the best method for you to reach that goal, because I'm assuming in that situation, you're not going to want to get pregnant for a number of years. And so in that situation, these longer acting, more effective methods would be more appropriate for those goals. And I think that's where medicine is kind of going to, just as, as a bigger, broader picture, is that we're getting away from system kind of goals. What we're looking at is patient-centered care. What is relevant and important to this patient? What goal is relevant to this patient? And so a conversation about contraception always starts with questions. You always have to question and ask your patient, what are your goals in life when it comes to your childbearing? What do you want? Ideally, think about that. And then let me use some science and innovation and medical technology to help you reach that goal. I am just your coach. I'm not the person who's going to tell you when you need to get pregnant, how many children you need to have, any of those things. Those are your decisions to be made. But I'm here as that person to help support you in reaching those goals. And that exercise is hugely powerful because that's what really sparks this empowerment mindset for a lot of young girls and women. It starts with reproduction first. It's not by accident that, the birth control pill came out in the 1960s. Originally, we talked about, so you could not sell it for contraception. So they had to say that this was a pill that was used to treat painful periods. That was the original sort of indication. And women are not, women are intelligent beings, they all developed period problems and went to their doctors and demanded this pill. This is what happened, right? So I think, we just need to take a look back at where we are now as a society, right? We've had context, we've had histories and stuff, but what policies define us as a people? Right. And I think this policy is one, with 83% support, that defines us as a people. Right. And I think it's a simple policy. It's a simple policy that will help so many Canadians. So I would really urge all your listeners to make their voices heard, to, get their names on this petition. We want this strong show of support to take to the government. We're hoping that on World Contraception Days, September 26th, we want a member statement in the House of Commons that will affirm this policy. That is our best case scenario. But we need the public's help to do this. Right. So if this is something that you're thinking about for yourself, for the people you love, for your children, your grandchildren, your descendants, descendants, if this defines, I think, and as Albertans, I think, and your listeners, I guess, across the country, right? But, we really are the leaders here. And I think, I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of the work that we've been doing in this province.
I see Real Talkers just off the, the live chat as we speak in real time. Brian and Kevin and others are saying that they've all just signed the petition. They said it was fast and easy to do.
I love, when you say dudes, I go, dudes, I love you, dudes.
There you go.
Thank you, Kevin and Brian.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that this is something that like the average person can, I mean, this just to me, I like when you're talking about empowerment. To me, this is a matter of dignity. It just makes sense. Like you said, it just makes sense. Our health policy needs to make sense. I don't want to drag other issues into this conversation and create red herrings and smoke screens and all that. But like, why don't we cover dental health in Canada? We understand that. Why don't we, a lot of people, and I think in good faith in the chat are saying, well, why don't we cover this, that, or the other? Why would we cover this before that? It doesn't have to be a competition. We don't have to choose between helping diabetics cover some of their costs and helping, half of our population have access to healthcare in this context. I think that that's something that we can have informed conversations about both at the same time.
Well, yes. And I agree. I agree with all of your listeners. Ideally, this should be like all prescriptions should be covered. Cost should never be an issue, whether it's for a diabetic or for a woman wanting contraception. I think the only difference we see here is that, it's where health and human rights intersect, right? And so, we have to start somewhere, right? We have to just start somewhere. The what about argument, I think, is a great one for, future. Like, let's keep going. We're not going to stop here. We're not going to say, okay, we cover contraception and that's going to be enough for health equity in this country. Obviously, there's going to be more advocacy that needs to be done, and to make sure that all Canadians get access to their medications for their health, whether it's for contraception or for their diabetes. But we need to start somewhere, right? We just need to start, and we get that ball rolling. And so if that's something that you believe in, so if you're a listener who's saying that I believe that, diabetics should get their meds covered, well, you should go sign this petition, because this is going to start that ball rolling about, that we need access to medications as well. We've done a great job of making sure that, access to, healthcare is universal, that it doesn't matter how much money you have in your pocketbook to access a doctor or a medical clinic or emergency room. And we need to make that same, movement with prescriptions, right? But we need to start somewhere.
I have so much respect for your passion, Doc, and I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us this morning about this. People can sign that petition. Like you said, they've got a week left to do it, but why wait? It takes less than a minute. Just do it today.
If you want to be a champion, get your friends to do, be our champions.
Sure.
You're probably not old enough, Ryan, but there was this commercial back in the day, and it was a woman who had tried some amazing shampoo, and then she told 5 friends, and they told 5 friends, and so on and so on. And this is where we're at right now. We have, we're at 7 days, and so if you want to be a real champion, which I feel like your listeners, are really tuned into this, right, is to not only sign, but, get 20 of your best friends to sign as well, and get them to get 20 of their best friends to sign, and let's show a really strong support from Alberta. I think, again, I would be really proud to take this petition back to Ottawa and show that, you guys need to just challenge, just even regions and how we think about what's important for us as a society as well.
Yeah, 4,800 signatures and counting. Like more than a third of them are from Alberta, which is, no, obviously you're from Alberta too, but still it's better than like you get your heart in your throat, you scroll down and hope you don't see like 6 from Alberta. So I know that this is an engaged audience. We say it's the most engaged talk show audience in the country, Doctor. And I just want to let people know, so the link is in the live chat. It'll be in the show notes for the podcast and YouTube. And then even easier, if you're out walking your dog listening to this right now, just open up your phone, just Google petition E-4516. Petition E-4516, and it'll take you right to the page from there. All right, here it is.
And it is a 2-step process. Sorry, I'm just going to say you register email, you get a link, and then and so once you link your email, that's when your vote counts.
Perfect. Good stuff. She is a recipient of the Cummings School of Medicine at the University of Calgary Alumni of Distinction. She's received the Recognition of Excellence from the Canadian College of Family Physicians. She's won the Legacy Award from the Calgary Board of Education. She's a recipient of the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. She's been named a Woman of Vision with Global Calgary, an Immigrant of Distinction, the Sharon Carey Community Leadership Award from Bow Valley College, and from the India-Canada Association of Calgary, an Outstanding Service Award. We've been joined by Dr. Rupinder Toor. Much respect, Doc. Thanks.
Great talking to you, Ryan.
Yeah, you as well. Boom.
I'm on board, 100%.
How can you kind of like, and I understand, I don't want to say just like, how can you not be? Because maybe someone would have their own personal reason that this isn't for them and they're not personally going to support it. And that's totally fine. That's your right. That's your choice. But generally speaking, as a civilized, empathetic, forward-thinking, evidence-based society, which we like to think that we are in Canada most of the time, how could you not?
It's crazy. And I'm just listening to her talk, and like, I'm not a doctor, and I had to kind of brush up on my sex ed skills before we had the good doctor on today. But like, guys, we should be supporting women not only with like reproductive rights and contraception, but in all areas, like just in a life journey, what women go through compared to men, like just emotionally, hormonally, their phases of life, pre-birth, during birth, postpartum, all these things. Like, we should be bearing the brunt of this, and it kind of pales in comparison what we have to go through. And I was just looking at some of the numbers. Like, we all know, like, sperm compared to eggs, like, the numbers are just way off. Like, women produce like 1 a month unless you're getting like hormone injections. Men, when we ejaculate, it's like anywhere from 100 to like 300 million or 30 million sperm. So like, we should be supporting them 100% on this, and letting them choose what they want to do with their bodies, when they want to have a kid, and they should be getting free contraception. The same way with menstrual rights. Like, I believe that stuff should be in every bathroom.
I noticed
free.
Some people that were
like,
commenting on that,
everywhere.
saying, tampons, pads, women's, like basically health supports should be covered.
It should be like tissue paper. Like, why is it not? And
100%.
I get the contraception is different. It's a pharmaceutical. It should be behind a counter. But this stuff should be accessible and free for all women. Right?
Yeah. Hey, but it seems like this is an appropriate time. It feels like an appropriate time. We've had some of you reach out to us and ask if the show is going to comment or take a position on an on-the-record comment that was made by an Edmonton broadcaster on Mark Connolly's CBC morning show a couple of days ago. I'm talking about Jason Gregor, who's launching with some of his colleagues a new sports AM radio station. These were the guys that were basically all canceled. Well, that's kind of a loaded word to use right now, but their station shut down at TSN a while ago.
The shows were canceled. They weren't canceled.
The shows
for
were
any
canceled.
Reason.
They weren't canceled.
Yeah.
And so, Mark Connolly, if you've missed it, I'm sure you did not miss it. I'm sure you've heard it. We did want to address this. Mark Connolly basically asks why there's no female hosts on the new sports station, and Gregor goes on this big, long answer, and I know that he's publicly stated he feels like people are taking him out of context. But basically, at the end of the day, he says that there weren't female broadcasters to consider in Edmonton. There really weren't anybody to hire. He's hired women in past, but at this point, it just wasn't there. And he's heard from people that women don't need to hear their sports from a woman. So, quote, it doesn't matter. Which those three words, it doesn't matter, are the ones that will haunt him. And kind of tough timing with the launch of this radio station. So I'm not going to sit and comment on it. I'll have my own thoughts on it, but I do want to let you know that next week on Wednesday's show, that's August 23rd, and there's a reason for the delay. Claire Hanna is going to join us. She's a former, by the way, member of Team Canada's women's volleyball team, and she's now killing it in broadcasting with TSN out of Ottawa. She's currently, she's over in Australia right now, so the time zones are kind of messed up, but she's covering the FIFA Women's World Cup. Claire's going to join us next Wednesday, and we're going to talk about it. We're just going to have a real conversation about what it's been like for her, trying to forge her path in broadcasting, and what she's noticed around her, what it's like to be around male athletes, what she makes of the comments, and we encourage your feedback on that as well. So it is on our radar. That is a story that we're happy to talk about. I know that some of you, it may not make us some friends in Edmonton, but it's certainly a legitimate conversation to be had, and now feels like the right time to talk about it. We're going to update a couple of other stories that are on our radar in just a second. I wanted to let you know that this show is supported by our friends at California Closets. When you think of California Closets, you no doubt are well aware of their reputation. Maybe you have a friend or a family member that started with a free design consultation with them and saw it all the way through to completion. Custom closets, storage solutions for the entire home, absolutely stunning craftsmanship, a total game changer. Well, we wanted to let you know that California Closets is now doing more and more work in folks' garages, kind of the overlooked part of the house if we're being honest, right? I mean, if your garage has looked like ours is a bad example, Johnny, because our garage is just a bar. But a lot of people's garages are, I'm talking about my buddies here. You know who you are. You got extension cords all over the floor. You got your summer tires leaning up against the wall, which is kind of by the kids' inflatables and floaties. If you're going to go to the beach for the weekend, you're looking for it in the garage, but you can't find it because it's behind the jerry cans. And by the way, where are the batteries for my drill? Why not make the workhorse of the home work for you? Have a custom designed garage storage cabinet and more built by the team at California Closets. You can get a free consultation today. It all starts at californiaclosets.ca. Our friends at Grand Dog Essentials, quality raw food. They were at our house just yesterday, John, delivering Moses's food. We get deliveries every single week or every second week whenever we need it. From this team, you can have the same experience if you live in Calgary, Edmonton, Central Alberta. Weekly delivery to those metro areas with minimum orders of $50. Why do we go with Grand Dog Essentials quality raw food? Why am I so proud to talk about them to you? Why do I encourage you to check out their quality raw food? Because we have seen the health impact of their products. We have seen the results, the proof of performance with our beloved family members, Moses and Monroe. You can go to the Shop Now link and check out their supplements. We're using lion's mane mushroom extract for Monroe, our lab. We're including it in her rotation to help ease her anxiety. Monroe really deals with anxiety. Just a beautiful, beautiful pup. And we're finding that the lion's mane organic mushroom extract, while a gut-friendly source of fiber that also provides benefits for senior dogs and overweight dogs, is really helping Monroe with her anxiety. You can check it out today at granddog.ca. If you're more focused right now on feeding the humans in your family, our friends at Friesen Brothers want to put a couple of things on your radar. Number one, new peach pies. This is the time of year where you don't want to mess around and wait. Don't delay your experience picking up a peach pie from our friends at Friesen Brothers. This is their latest masterpiece. You can check it out at Friesen.com. That's Freson.com. That's their website I'm showing you. Handcrafted peach pies, baked fresh daily, using 100% real peaches, nothing out of the can. Come on. And 100% Alberta flour as well. The ultimate treat to savor as summer winds down. There's more information at Friesen.com/pies. There's got to be vegan vanilla ice cream, yeah?
Of course, yeah.
Are you an ice cream on the peach pie guy, or are you just a straight up peach?
A scoop of ice cream.
You got to have
with the
vanilla
pie.
bean ice cream, right? I don't even know why I asked that question. It's so obvious. Friends, we're almost ready to reveal to you our backyard makeover. Our friends at Eden Landscaping have done a remarkable job bringing our outdoor space to life. You can follow my wife, Carrie Skelton, on Instagram to see almost daily updates in her stories. It's been amazing dealing with this custom landscape builder. More than 20 years of on-the-ground experience in Edmonton and area. Our family's probably a lot like yours. I don't know your situation, but this is something that we took very seriously, something that we planned for a long time, something that we financially prepared for a long time. Now to see it all coming together, I can't even describe the feeling. Whatever your custom landscaping needs are, whether it's stone and woodwork, whether it's retaining walls, maybe a water feature, maybe you need some lighting, some accent lighting out there, front yard, backyard, or maybe it's just practical stuff like irrigation and drainage. They do it all at Eden Landscaping, and you can find them online at landscapeedmonton.ca. Attaboy.
I love Stephanie here. She's like, Ryan, you just mentioned walking your dog. I am literally listening right now while walking my dog.
I love that. She's maybe streaming the live audio on the Mixler audio app presented by California Closets. Stephanie, shout out to you. That's great. We are paying attention to a couple of stories, and some of these are quite frankly gut punches. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to update a story. This was one that was making national news, and for all the wrong reasons, out of our home city of Edmonton. Earlier this week, Edmonton police had asked the public for assistance in identifying a man that, as you're about to see, we're going to show you some of the video, so this is not appropriate for kids. We're going to show you what a portion of what a Muslim family endured when a 29-year-old man, we know who he is now, basically absolutely verbally assaulted them and then exposed himself. There was a minor present, by the way. He exposed himself to a child, and he's now facing charges. But in case you're one of those that don't know what we're talking about, here's what went down in Edmonton last weekend.
Get the fuck out of here!
Take a video, yeah, take a video. Yeah.
My dad would fucking kill you! You fucking little bitch!
But
Picture of my ID, you fucking get a picture of my fucking ID, you little bitch! You little rat ass bitch! Don't fucking tell the police! You fucking act all tough, then fucking
Just
go
one
back to your
second.
fucking country, you fucking
one
loser.
second, 1 second. I'll
Fucking
show you.
brown ass little bitch!
I'll show you.
Get the fuck out of here!
I'll show you.
You fucking loser! Get the fuck out of here!
Come on, I'll do.
Get the fuck out of here!
Come.
You can't do shit, you fucking loser!
خلاص بابا خلاص تعال
I'll show you. I got you on the video.
وخر
I got
وخر
you.
خلاص خلاص
I got
خلاص
you.
Yeah, look at my fucking
I got you.
All right, so that's the point where they let him know that they've got him on video, and he exposes his genitalia to them. The family telling people in that video, by the way, was courtesy of the Instagram account Yegwave. It seems to get like all the video of all this kind of stuff in Alberta.
They don't
these
need us
days.
hyping them up. They got it.
Yeah, but I want to credit it where credit is due. The Edmonton police have confirmed that 29-year-old Thurman Brietzke has been charged with 3 counts of uttering threats as well as an indecent act, and the EPS Hate Crimes Unit is also recommending that Section 718.2, this is the Criminal Code of Canada, be applied in this case, allowing the courts to consider increased sentencing when there's evidence that the offense was motivated by hatred. The complainants, this family, have been offered support through EPS crime and trauma-informed support services. This reportedly all started, this family minding its own business, the mom in the family wearing hijab, and that's apparently what set this guy off.
Yeah.
He referred to them as effing Muslims, at which point the man started recording the video, and then that's a portion of that video. It goes on from there that we showed you there. So all I have to say about this is, number one, you look and you see a situation like this, and number one, the guy's got a lot going on, obviously. The guy references, number one, my dad would kill you. The guy's 29 years old, kind of using the playground stuff. Like, my dad would beat you up. My dad can run fast. My dad would kill you. But the anger there, the seething anger that this guy feels, no wonder that family started recording.
Yeah.
And I would suspect, based on some emails that we've received to this show, not exclusively from Muslim members of our audience, but many of them over the past 3 years, tragically and very unfortunately, this is far from an isolated incident.
Oh, no.
And not just in Edmonton either.
No.
We've seen families targeted and killed. I think of the van attack in Eastern Canada and Ontario. This is something that needs to be taken deadly seriously, and I'm grateful that the Edmonton police took this as seriously as they did, and I am grateful that members of the public, that EPS on Monday put out the plea to the public to let us know who this guy is. On Tuesday, they made the arrest. Despite his best efforts to scrub his social channels, you won't find him online. I don't know what else there is to say about this except for Buddy fucked around and he's about to find out.
Well, you got to throw the book at him. And like you're saying, this stuff used to happen in dark corners and at night and at bus stations. And now this is someone obviously out for a run in the morning, early afternoon. Like, this stuff is just happening, a block off of White Ave or in downtown in broad daylight in the public. It's pretty disgusting. I mean, we wanted to talk about it, but again, there's not really a second opinion to take here. This is totally disgusting and scary. There was a minor there, and he shows his penis. Like,
I think he's gonna he'll
doing?
probably wind up on a sex offender registry for that.
He's ruined his life.
This is something that any time that anybody Googles this guy's name, this is the very first thing they're going to find. And I don't feel sorry for him one bit.
No.
And I think that we don't necessarily sometimes on this show, to state the obvious, and then we can move on. Not everything that we have on this show is a debate or hashing out both sides.
No.
Sometimes it's just us taking a position on something and ensuring that it sees the light of day.
Yeah. Even if this wasn't racist, if it was just like someone berating someone and then showing their, like, it's still, it's the worst thing I've seen in a while.
He ticked all the boxes.
All the boxes.
Like, he's racist. He's homophobic. He's Islamophobic.
There's
He's
kids there.
There's kids
There's-
there. Like, he basically ticked all the boxes, this 29-year-old did. Thurman Brietzke. A lot of you are saying that I'm not sure that this guy's dad's actually going to be proud of him at all. Ryan says your dad's probably actually pretty embarrassed of you, bud. We talked yesterday, and this cost of living stuff. It kind of weaves in on a couple of different fronts, and I'm grateful that Dr. Toor brought that up today, because this is something that's becoming more and more relevant to Canadians of all demographics. Like, we're talking young people, we're talking retirees, people living in cities, people living in more rural communities. Yesterday, we talked to Tristan Hopper of the National Post, why he thinks that Pierre Poilievre is enjoying such a surge in popularity. You can check out that interview. That was just yesterday. That was the 16th, or August 16th episode of Real Talk. He talks about how more and more young Canadians, let's say under the age of 25, are starting to consider more conservative approaches to governance, more conservative policies on things like finances. And I know we're going to get messages from some of you that say, look at this, we got conservative governments that spend bigger than liberal governments, and we got conservatives running deficits, and we can get into all of that. But the party, and it's worked for decades at a provincial and federal level, parties have established themselves, conservative parties, that is, as the better equipped to deal with or to manage your finances, and people buy into it. I mean, in the most recent provincial election, we heard people talking about, I like where the NDP stands on this, but I just don't know where the economy's at right now. I think we got to go UCP, and that's like the biggest thing. That's like the biggest objection, probably, that the NDP in Alberta and the other opposition parties that are not conservative in other provinces have had to fight against. Well, now the federal government's in the same situation, and the Trudeau Liberals have they've got a number of real issues on their hands, and that's one of them. It even came up yesterday in our conversation with Mark Doran. I mean, we're talking about wind and solar. We're talking about Alberta's energy future, Canada's energy future. What a great conversation that was. Hey, why don't we go to the wake-up call? This was like 30 seconds from Mark, who's the founder of the Polluter Pay Federation. He's talking about orphan wells, oil and gas infrastructure. And this is a guy, by the way, that came on and planted his flag. In the first 5 minutes of the interview, he says, I love oil and gas. He's worked in oil and gas for decades. But he gave us a reminder, and it was a bit of a wake-up call, to be honest, about how much aging infrastructure there is underneath us everywhere. Back to back, you've said on this show, I love oil and gas, and you've said our oil and gas is not ethical.
It's true. I mean, I love the industry.
That's real talk.
Here's the other thing. We've got 460,000 holes in the ground in this province that penetrate groundwater. Most of them are going to leak gas to atmosphere in the future. We talk about removing concrete from the base of wind turbines, but guess what? We've got oil well cement that's not going to last in these wells, and pipe that's going to corrode away in these wells. And there's lots of urban wells, at least 1,400 in town. There's hardly any town or city in this province that doesn't have oil or gas in it at one point. So we've got these abandoned wells, and abandoned means sealed and no longer productive. They're in our backyards, they're in our school playgrounds, they're in our fields, they're in our parking lots, and most of them are leaking.
How is that for a wake-up call?
That was like a punch in the face when he said that to me, because, we're all worried about orphan wells and whatever, but when he started those visual images that we showed, but they went through my mind.
He's talking about how the concrete...
We can't see them, but they're in schoolyards, they're in backyards, they're in parking lots.
Concrete's going to fail, gases are going to leak.
And they're leaking.
So it's prompted more and more people, I think, to start taking a long, hard look about what is going to power our society moving forward. And obviously, the tone, the message that the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, is taking is accurate. Alberta will need natural gas, especially with phasing out coal-fired power. I think that conversation to a certain degree is becoming obfuscated. Like, people are being tricked, or some people are being tricked into thinking that they have to choose between a reliable source of energy through the year, natural gas, and wind and solar, which is not the case,
Not at
obviously.
all.
And we've done a ton of shows on this, and people can check them out. But there were numbers released by the Consumer Price Index yesterday that we can't ignore, and we wanted to show this to you, Real Talkers. This is from Andrew Friesen, who's a data scientist. And he says, per the CPI report, this is the Consumer Price Report Index. This is how people figure out things like where inflation's at and all that kind of stuff. These are the electricity rate hikes, the actual like real dollars and cents. These are the hikes province by province comparing July with 1 year earlier. So you got Newfoundland, it's up 6%. Nova Scotia's up 4%. It's up across the country, everywhere except for Manitoba, by the way.
Saskatoon, pretty big
PEI,
bump.
5%. Saskatchewan, 12%. BC, 2%. Yukon, 6%. Alberta, 128% increase in the cost of electricity year over year from last July to this summer.
And, you know, I read into this when I saw it yesterday. I screenshot the graph. I was going to say it to you, and then I woke up this morning. You had it in our Slack already, the exact numbers. And I was trying to read into it. Why is this price gouging? It has to be. But then I look, and, you know, some of the people who are saying why the increase is so big is that, you know, Alberta in the last 5 or 6 years has invested so much, not only in oil and gas, but in renewables, in wind and solar, and we need to pay for that. But to me, 128% does not make sense.
Well, this provincial government's
for
got to
that.
figure something out and fast.
Yeah.
And we're seeing Canadians across the country basically crying out for assistance. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory sense. There's a gal that is on TikTok under the handle Homesteading Millennial. We understand her to be 22 years old. This is about a 90-second clip that we wanted to play. This is just one person, but this is the face. This is a face of exactly what we're talking about.
I want to know how the hell people in Canada are even living. I generally consider myself a positive person. I'm like resourceful, but some stuff happened around the property, and like, well, I know I'll never truly be homeless. Like, I have family to live with, and, you know, like, I have options. Like, I'm luckier than a lot of other people, but how the hell is anyone existing in Canada? Like, I feel trapped. And like, I just got a good job. I started in September, but even with that job, it pays less than 40 grand a year. And it's a job that requires like education, and even on that job, like, I still can't do shit. I can't buy anything. I can't afford the rent these days. Like, I'm just feeling so much despair. And I know I'm normally like really, really positive, but I'm just like, how is everyone else, and are you okay? Because the answer is probably no. And I know I'm lucky. I don't have kids. I have like good family that will support me, but I feel like I can't stay here, but I can't move anywhere else, because anywhere else.
Can't move anywhere else, she says. And she goes on to talk about how anywhere else there are its own set of challenges. Anywhere else, some of the realities remain around high rent costs and everything else. Fuel's up. Utilities are up. Insurance is way up in the province of Alberta. We mean way up. And it's impossible, I think, not to be moved by that person that's on TikTok. If you want to shoot her a note, send her a note of encouragement. She's at Homesteading Millennial.
And she's getting a ton. Yeah, it's on TikTok. It's on Instagram. It's on Twitter.
That's
desperation. I'll never call it X. It's on Twitter this morning when I wake up. But, man, you watch her talking. And, you know, some of the comments are like, you know, well, you got to pull up your bootstraps, and, you know, you shouldn't have got a liberal arts degree. They don't even know what her education is. But the point is, like, and I was watching a Netflix documentary on this, and Obama was talking about this. Like, we have so many things nowadays. We've got phones and TVs, and they're all cheap and easily accessible. But the things we really need, like energy and, you know, housing, it's monstrously higher and expensive than it ever has been before. And I'm watching her talk, and she's saying, I'm grateful. I feel grateful as well. We have a job we both love. We're pretty comfortable. We're not rich by any means, but like, I talk to people all the time, friends and family, who are just scared out of their minds. And when she said that thing about, I don't have kids, thank God, that was the biggest gut punch for me. Because, yeah, if you want to have kids or not, whatever. But if you're being forced to choose because of the way the economy is, because of how high your bills are, because you can't find a home for a reasonable cost, that just really, when she said that, I was like, wow. Because these are challenges. These are questions. These are things that, past generations never had to deal with. You hear all the boomers and everyone talk about how, I bought a house right out of college. And
it's not to say people didn't have their challenges, but I just don't think right now that it's, people can't afford, first of all, a lot of people can't afford post-secondary education.
No.
Right?
In the first place.
It's why when we spoke with our dear friend Julie Rohr before she passed, and we talked about how her legacy, part of her legacy, would continue. A scholarship was something that was very important to
Another
her to
thing
remove
that's way up.
financial barriers from people. And then you look and you get an education, but then rent is out of control and groceries are out of control. More people are using food banks now than ever before.
Power bills out of control.
And so people are wondering now. I mean, I saw Sharon earlier in our chat today say that she knows 2 people that had their power cut off this week. MA right now is in our chat, says that their 35 and 40-year-old kids have both moved back home. Says my daughter with us and my son with his in-laws. Others are just wondering, Adam, for example, great to see him in the chat, says employers also need to review what they're paying people. Adam says $40,000 a year is not a living wage, and it hasn't been for a long time. Ryan's wondering, why are food prices continuing to rise in Canada? I mean, these are questions that we endeavor to ask on this show and to find answers to. I found that like earlier this week, it kind of sucked, as a matter of fact, to figure out, why are electricity prices so high? And we talked to an expert, and we find out that basically there's absolutely nothing that anybody can do about it. The prices are high because big corporations are making those prices high and because nobody's holding them accountable.
It's really scary. And Ben in here says, age-old question, why is everything up?
Yeah.
And then I get it. Inflation, things are always going to rise in price. But the correlation between like a living wage and the prices going up has gotten way out of whack. And like I said, it's not just listeners. I know people, like you just said, who are like, man, I can't pay my power bill. I'm going to have to get a late charge. I'm going to have to wait another 2 weeks. I can't afford a house, but I have 2 kids and we live in a small townhouse.
People
and
are
we
making
need a
tough
bigger
choices,
home.
man.
And, we need a bigger car. We need an SUV or a minivan, and we've got, a sedan, and nobody can afford any of it.
Yeah. We're in part talking about this because we want to remind you that this is an opportunity, this show, this community for you to get your message out. We want to know how you're approaching this, how you're managing this, how this is impacting you. What are the real life, real world stories? We've got an email here from Brendan who wrote in, who's talking in particular about this moratorium on Alberta's renewable energy sector. But he's talking in part about what it's doing to people's jobs. He's talking about the fact that a lot of people, this is going to mean unemployment for them. For a lot of people, this is loss of opportunity. These are people, skilled tradespeople in many circumstances, that have probably been looking for something stable for a long time. And it's yet another kick in the teeth. But we cannot ignore and will not ignore the fact that nobody in Canada is even close, no other jurisdiction, to Alberta's skyrocketing energy costs, the electricity costs in particular, up nearly 130% in 1 year. That is 10 times the next closest province, 10 times the second place. And this is not a list that you want to be first place on. Talk@RyanJespersen.com is where you can send us an email. These conversations are presented by Real Talk sponsors like our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. And because of the weather, because of how beautiful it's been, and because of Miracle Treat Day on August 10th, we've spent a lot of time talking about blizzards. But I want to bring this back. Bring it back. I want to bring it back to the signature stack burgers. Nobody in quick service restaurants does burgers better than Dairy Queen. And in particular, my recommendation today is the Bacon 2 Cheese Deluxe. It's the double DQ signature stacker featuring 100% seasoned real beef patties, topped off with 2 different types of perfectly melted cheese, applewood smoked bacon, tomato, onion, lettuce, pickles, ketchup, and mayo on a soft and toasted bun. This is the burger that will turn your day around, I guarantee it. And you can find it at the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. Hey, if all this talk about employment has you thinking about making a move, or maybe you've been pounding the pavement looking for work for a while, if you're an electrician, or if you're an apprentice, or if you're just a self-starter with a history or big potential in sales, Kubi Renewable Energy would love to hear from you. You know Kubi, a full-service contractor for residential and commercial solar power systems. Well, they're currently hiring right now to add to their installation team and their sales team. They're working in BC, Alberta, Yukon, Northwest Territories, Saskatchewan, you name it. Commercial, residential, industrial, agricultural. One of the best things that they offer, they do all the paperwork for you, and they know a lot of these incentives inside out. So depending on where you live, there's a good chance you could get a nice chunk of change to apply toward your installation. It all starts with a free quote today by visiting kubienergy.ca. You know who else is hiring is our friends at Apex Automation. They're looking for engineers. If you're a PEng and you're sick and tired of your current job situation, you're not feeling challenged, you know for a fact that you're not reaching your full potential, check out the careers link at apexautomation.ca. That website is also where you can learn more about what they're doing in engineering, fabrication, automation. They are on the leading edge of industry, and they would love for you to join their team. Whether it's advanced process controls, remote terminal units, alarm management, autonomous vehicles and machinery, terminal management out on the coast, robotics, you name it, human-machine interfaces, this stuff is fascinating. Apex Automation is the fastest growing automation firm in Western Canada for a reason. It's the way they treat their people. You can learn more about their corporate culture today by visiting apexautomation.ca. We're putting a call out to decision makers today. If you operate a small business, a big business, or maybe you work for a municipality anywhere in Alberta or Saskatchewan, we encourage you to take 2 seconds to check out Local Environmental Services. You know, they got the front load bins. They do residential and industrial, commercial recycling and garbage collection, but they're about so much more than that. They believe that communities deserve better service, better prices, more support for local causes. They can show you today how they can help when you visit localenvironmental.ca. And before we get back to the show, a quick shout out to our friends at Complete Care Restoration. This is the team that built our studio, and we are forever grateful for the craftsmanship and the professionalism that they displayed. If you find yourself in a tough situation, if you find yourself dealing with fire damage, flood damage, maybe you've discovered mold or asbestos as part of your renovation project at home, you maybe didn't see that coming, you're going to want to take 2 seconds today to get in touch with Complete Care Restoration. You can find them online under the sponsors tab on our website, or give them a call at 780-454-0776. That's Complete Care Restoration. They've got 2 thumbs up from all of us here at Real Talk. You talk about fire damage. I was spending some time with some friends of mine just last night, catching up, and they're homeowners in Maui on the island, in Kihei in particular. But hearing their perspective, they know people, obviously, that are personally completely devastated. They know some people that are still missing near Lahaina, and it is unbelievable seeing what is happening there on that Hawaiian island, on the island of Maui right now. The death toll is into the triple digits. I think now, last I saw, it was at 111, but they said to me last night, and it's just a gut punch to hear it, they said, there's more than 1,000 people missing. They said, forget about this, 36 or 53, 88. We've seen these numbers jump up. They said, this is going to be one of the most significant and deadliest natural disasters that the United States, certainly that Hawaii and maybe that the world has ever seen. It is unbelievable hearing the stories of what's been happening there in Lahaina.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more video every day. I saw, somebody was trying to exit out on the water in like a boat, but it was like a paddle boat, not a canoe, but bigger, and came across like a whole family, like 5 people, 3 kids, mom and a dad. And they had to get them all in the boat, and you're just seeing some of this video, and it's just coming out every day, and it's just horrible. And then now Yellowknife, the evacuation's going on there, and it's just, a lot of the doom scrolling today just seems to be about wildfire and flood and all of that nature is unleashing on us right now. And how can you not relate it back to everything we're talking about with energy and climate change all this week? So
yeah, I saw some really disturbing numbers as our fellow Canadians in Yellowknife and area are getting ready to leave. We're talking like almost 25,000 people.
Yeah,
and
no worries.
This is a mandatory evacuation due to this encroaching wildfire. I want to give credit to Brandy Morin, who's a member of our editorial board and a great friend of the show, an award-winning journalist. Brandy is doing advocacy on this right now, pointing out that the price for flights has been cranked up right now. People that were searching for flights to get out of Yellowknife, I saw one in particular, Yellowknife to Calgary. That flight was listed one way at $4,700. That's $4,665 before taxes and fees, one way to fly from Yellowknife to Calgary. They said that flight would typically be, $500 to $700 depending. And so, these people are in an impossibly difficult situation, obviously a very stressful situation. And that's a story that we're going to be keeping an eye on.
Did you just say they raised the cost of the flights? Sorry, I was reading the comments.
Well, I don't know if I say they raised the cost of the flights.
It sounded
but
like
the
you
cost
said
of the flights went way up as demand went way up. So I guess, they raised the cost of the flights.
I guess
it's
if demand goes up,
$4,700 one way. But if I'm Air Canada, WestJet, if I'm the Canadian government for that matter, I mean, I recognize logistically what we're talking about here, but you've got to make it possible for people to get their families out of Yellowknife without incurring a tab of $20,000.
Why not just sell more
who
flights?
Who can even do that? Why not bring in more planes?
Way?
Why not bring in buses? And maybe they are.
Instead of
But this is a developing story, and this is one right now where I just think, and you can follow Brandy on Twitter at Songstress28 to see what she's talking about. She says these jacked prices are through the roof right now, and she's calling out Air Canada in particular. These are the types of things that people don't forget.
Not at all.
We remember when we were in our time of greatest need, what you did for your bottom line, for your shareholders. And this is something that we'll certainly keep an eye on.
You're talking about these airline companies going through hard times as well. People are going to remember Air Canada if they didn't jack their rates, if they brought in more planes, if they gave a discount to people trying to flee, trying to get their family to another part of the country. So, yeah.
Wanted to put on your radar, and I saw a couple of you, I think in the chat, I apologize, I can't remember your name, saying, here's another question I'd like for, we dropped a little nugget at the very end of yesterday's episode. It had just been confirmed, letting you know that on Monday, I'm going to be interviewing Take Back Alberta founder David Parker. This is one that's been a long time in the works, and I've seen a lot of you say, well, I'd love for Ryan to ask him this. I'd love for Ryan to ask him this. I have a list of questions. You remember back in the day in school, Johnny, we had foolscap. Yeah. Remember there was like the regular paper, and then there was foolscap. I think I could do like 2 pages back, front and back of foolscap of questions for this guy. It's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to it, and you can let us know what you would like to hear from him. We're going to do our best to fit in as many questions as we can and try to get to know a little bit what makes this guy tick. He's kind of the mystery man. He's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. They claim, Take Back Alberta does, that they got rid of Jason Kenney. They claim that they installed Danielle Smith into the office of Premier and that they're, well, I'm not going to speak for him. We'll see what he says. That's coming up on Monday's Real Talk. Also wanted to let you know, coming up on Tuesday's show, as we say goodbye today, also want you to circle your calendars. Paul McLaughlin's going to be joining us. He's the president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. That's the RMA. They've got a different take than a lot of others on this moratorium for wind and solar. Again, I won't speak for Paul, but he's probably going to come on here and say that it's a good thing. We'll ask him why. And then Claire Hanna, Wednesday, what it's been like coming up as a woman working in sports broadcasting. We'll stay committed to that Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen.